Good afternoon, my name is Ged Williams and I've been asked to chair this one because I'm not an author. Because what we're going to be talking about today is how authors treat police procedure and court procedure in their books and whether it's good for their books or bad for their books. And I've got over 30 years experience on lots of different roles in the judicial system. So if they're telling lies, I'll know what they're doing. But I won't tell you. So what we're going to do first, because there's 5, I thought it's better than me introducing them is let them introduce themselves. So what I'm going to ask them all to do is give a very short intro of themselves and tell you about their latest book. So I'll pass on to Liz first, as she's next to me.
Hello everybody, I'm Liz Mistry and I'm based in Bradford. I live in Bradford, but as you can tell from the accent, I'm Scottish by birth and heart. So although I live in Yorkshire and have done for about 40 years now, the book that, I'll show you one that I haven't been scribbling on and writing notes in. The book that I'm going to be talking about today is The Blood Promise, and I actually went back up to Scotland to write this book. I didn't physically go back up, I just sort of wrote the book up in Scotland. And it's all about the area that I grew up. It's quite a dark serial killer crime fiction book, like the rest of my books. So, so although I'm a Yorkshire writer, this particular one is set up in Scotland, although my other 2 series have both been set in Bradford. And I think that's about all you need to know about me for now.
Yes, just as far as that goes, I need to have a mind.
Good afternoon. My name's A.K. Adams, also known as Arthur. I've been writing now since about 2010. My first novel was published in April 2013, and since then I've had 9 crime novels published. I finished the 10th one, and I'm about halfway through the 11th. They're all standalone thrillers. I brought, I think it's 6 here today, if anybody wants to have a look at the end of the session. They're all standalone thrillers, which means that I get to choose different detectives every time. I get to kill different people and murder different people every time. I think sometimes with those that are sequential, and I've read other authors, if you read sort of the 5th in the series, you get a little bit out of kilter, so you really need to go back to one. So all of my novels are standalone so far. Ideas I get from everyday things, something somebody said in the supermarket, a small newspaper article, something a friend said, usually starting with, "You'll never believe what happened to me this morning." And that's often the catalyst to get me going. So that's where I'm from.
Welcome. Thank you.
Oh,
it's gone. It's done. Oh, yes. It's there. Good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for coming. My name is Malcolm Hollingdrake. I write a series set here in the beautiful spa town of Harrogate. And I've just finished book 14. It's just been proofed for the first time and going for the second proofing very soon. But I also write a series set in Merseyside because I now live closer to Merseyside than I do to Harrogate. And so when doing research, it's much easier to walk the streets of Liverpool. And as beautiful, I must say, the city is. I've been writing since, well, I've had books published since 2016. I'm now a hybrid author. My Harrogate series is self-published, and my Merseyside is published by a company called Holbeck Books. Thank you very much.
Hello there. Does this work?
You have to switch it on.
Yeah.
Right up to your mouth.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's it.
My name's Catherine, and I accidentally write police procedurals. The latest one is the current one, which is called Action Twice, and it's a dual timeline set in 1989 and in 2002, and it follows DI Ziggy Thorns and his team in and around Leeds, solving murders and crimes.
Good afternoon. My name's Jon Mason. I've always that's the name on the books. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. I retired from the West Yorkshire Police in 1993, having served for 29 years. you only get 10 for murder these days. Now, to have a murder for the police to investigate, someone has to die, and murder is brutal, and that's my point of view. I don't write cosy books at all. I write adult, historic, crime fiction from the time when policemen used to walk the beat. That's before the computer chip, if anybody can remember so far back. Well, when I decided to write about what...
Yeah,
When I decided to write about what I knew, I wanted to be different. I opted for something that no one else has done, ever. My story commences on day one of a police officer's career. Brian Blake was born. The difference between some grizzled detective chief inspector and a raw recruit is age, experience, knowledge. The DCI is more likely to be nearer being an alcoholic, and the probationer will not be getting letters from his divorced wife. No,
up again.
will not be getting letters from his divorced wife's solicitor. What the recruit requires is enthusiasm, a desire to learn, and to know the difference between right and wrong. He also needs to be working towards living long enough so he can draw his pension. Now, the power complex comes later. I sent him to the same training establishment that I attended in 1965, and this is a photograph I took of Pamelash, which is, or was, 1.5 miles over there. If you're coming in from Leeds, turn left where it says Burn Bridge, and it's on the left as you drive up the hill, or it was. The only thing that's left now is the original Victorian mansion and the library. Everything else is being bulldozed because they're going to build executive quality houses. But I've got lost in the house now. You can find out more of, if you want to see what Pamelash looked like in my day, then if you go to my website, jonmasonbooks.com, there's a bit of history and also photographs. I even put Brian in the same dormitory that I slept in, and even in the same bed that I slept in. But there's nothing homoerotic about that. He went there 2 years before I did. And when you write the books, you can do what you want with the characters. But everything in here is fiction, apart from details of the building, the courses, and the gymnastics that actually happened. And so welcome to my world of antagonism, deceit, murder, espionage, sex, and romance. Thank you. Not necessarily in that order.
Well, then they're reserved for 2 constables only. Right, we're now going to get down to the nitty-gritty. Now you know them all, and I'm not going to pick on this first every time. So you can sit back and relax till the end of this next one. The next one is, do you feel police procedure and court procedures get in the way of a good story? And I'm going to ask Arthur, A.K. Adams, to answer first, and then go down the line again.
I don't think so. I think when you're writing a crime novel, one's always allowed a bit of leeway, you know, when you're using your own imagination. And if one was strictly writing a crime novel using a court procedure to the letter, you could argue it might be a little bit boring. A couple of years ago, spent 8 weeks at Teesside Crown Court, just a bit further up the road from here, on a case which I can't talk about. But I found that although the court procedure at times was a bit laborious, as a member of the jury for 8 weeks, I found that experience extremely interesting. So I think the answer to the question basically is no. Don't want to let it get in the way of a good story. Maybe stick to the main lines, but you can always go a little bit off-piste, as long as it's believable and creditable. What you don't want is a crime thriller where someone starts going, well away from what really can happen, and you're only in chapter 3, and the person reading the book says, well, I've had enough of that. So I think the answer is don't let court procedures and police procedural things get in the way of a good story. If you've got a good story, go for it, use your imagination, and let the reader be the judge.
Thank you. And I think the reader can be a judge, believe me. I was writing one particular story, and I wrote that to actually make somebody unconscious, they would have to have a certain number of milligrams. I think I put 10 milligrams of this particular drug to knock them out. Unfortunately for me, the publisher had sent the manuscript to a chemist, Brian Price.
Yeah.
And I got a message back from Brian saying, oh no, I don't think you're right there, Malcolm. I think you'd need at least 12 milligrams. I thought, my goodness me. And I learned a lesson from that. If I was ever unsure, that I would always write, I would use just enough. And that seemed to cover me. But I think with police procedurals, I agree that you have to be, as I said, they will let you know. So the police procedural element, I believe, you have to do your research. I have never had a court procedure in one of my books, and I've written 18, because I always finish where they are caught. And whether that's because I'm a coward, I'm not too sure. But within the police procedurals, you could not stick to a proper timescale. And that's critical, because your book has to keep a certain pace. So if you followed police procedurals to the letter, your book would end up as War and Peace, or that length. So it's about being selective, and you also have to remember that we are writing fiction at the end of the day.
Yeah, entirely agree with what you've said there. I work with, it was the former chief superintendent of Brighton and Hove. He works with Peter James, a guy called Brian Bartlett. And he is himself a crime fiction writer. Obviously, he has 30 years experience behind him, but he has taught me from the beginning to put in just enough procedure for it to be deemed correct, but for it not to take away from the story. And that is something that goes through my mind. There's also a lovely little thing for a writer called acknowledgements, where we can always put in the back, Greg Bartlett was my advisor. If anything is wrong, it's all my fault.
No, it wasn't really getting the way. Did every policeman stick to the rules? No. It's called the human condition. But by the time the paperwork went into court, you can bet your bottom dollar that it did. And I have never known a case that I was personally involved with which was criticised by the judge or the magistrates for being totally out of line. These 3 books are a trilogy. This starts off with Blake on training school, then that takes you through his probation. And whilst they are, standalone stories, they are all overlapping. So I get round this element of the gap between the end of proceedings and the court case by having an incident in here that's dealt with at the back end of this one. So there is the continuity there, and I can get everything in within the time scale, but not so it's exaggerated. But coming from my background, it's a bit like driving. If you're a good driver or an experienced driver, you change gear. It's second thought. It's without a thought. It's an automatic reaction. Just to get in, following police procedure was second nature to me. But not everybody can get it right. The biggest problem that you're going to find with court proceedings, and we were chatting about this earlier, is when a police officer hasn't prepared for the court. So you obviously you don't know what questions you're going to be asked. Now, by the prosecution, that's going to be based on your statement. But the defence don't necessarily play by the same rules. And if you haven't done your preparation, then you can be caught out. So that's down to the individual making a mistake. But by and large, it doesn't interfere with the way that, well, certainly that I've approached these books.
So I do quite a lot of research about police procedure, and then practically none of it makes it into the book.
Yeah.
Because, as everybody else has said, you want your book to be fast-paced, you want it to be engaging, you want the bits that you put in to be accurate, but I think avoidance is the best tactic for me anyway.
Yeah.
So because I want it to be accurate, I tend to sort of, like Malcolm says, sort of fudge it a little bit by just saying, oh, and you know, the DNA results will come in, blah, 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 and not be too specific about things. Because I think, you know, we want to read it as an enjoyable process. You know, we don't want to be bogged down with it. If we wanted to learn about police procedure, we would read books about police procedure, but we want to learn about dark and gritty murders, and that's where I put my focus. So although I try to be accurate, and I do a lot of research on it, very little of that research makes it into the book. It's more background knowledge for me to be able to say, well, I don't think that'll work, so I'm not going to include it. And that's how I write.
I think that was one of the things that Graham also taught me. I've never been a police officer, but he did say that actually the life of a police officer is mostly paperwork. Yeah. And if you was to put that in a book, it'd be as dull as dishwater.
I did one reference to, because it's based in Scotland, and I was so proud of this research I'd done, and I'd found this particular form that was a fairly new form that Police Scotland had introduced, and it was for the pathologists to fill in. And I thought, oh, I spent ages researching it and thinking, that's a really good idea, that's a really good form to have. And yeah, that really sort of covers the pathologist and, you know, make sure he doesn't get sued for anything. And then when it came to writing, I thought, well, I'm going to slot it in. So I referenced the form and quickly moved on. So all these people were thinking, what the heck is this form? But it was just too good to miss out. Yeah. The editor will no doubt slash it. What are you talking about? Who cares about this form?
I'll say that I quite understand that about the Scottish law, because I had to do a Scottish law conversion course at one stage. The Scottish law is so different to English law.
Wow.
It's absolutely frightening. They have collaboration and all sorts of things that English law doesn't have. And it really makes it hard to get a conviction. I don't know how to convict anyone in Scotland. So, we don't want to move on to the next question, but I think most people answered it in the last question. Do your characters always stick to procedures, although they're likely to bend the rules? What I mean by bending the rules is, do they go and kick a front door in without having a warrant? Do they go, you know, do they tamper with the evidence in the evidence room without putting the name on the label? You know, those little things that get things kicked out of court. So, we'll start off with Malcolm first.
That's an easy one, isn't it, really? No, my police officers are all very respectable. I think that goes down from rank, doesn't it? I think it depends with your novice at the very beginning, a PCSO standing guarding a crime scene, to a DCI. A DCI will want everything doing to the letter. And then it fades, it becomes blurred as you come down to the lower ranks, I feel. I can't really say, I wouldn't put myself in the position within the books to allow anybody to be seen to be bending those rules, and I would avoid those at all costs. I would try to make the book as accurate as possible, as enjoyable as possible, as factual as possible within fiction, but no, I don't think any of mine would bend the rules to that extent.
Yeah, I think my detective, Siggy, he does stick to the rules unless he's pushed. He's a DI to start with, so he can get away with a little bit more. But he's a bit of a... He's not a rebel exactly, but he did almost get sacked in the third book for being disrespectful to a senior officer and went off on his own tangent. So I think I like to think of him as more of a rebel than out and out corrupt or breaking the rules properly. Yeah? A bit like me.
Right, what you know.
Yeah, right, what you know exactly.
As authors, if we can't break the rules, there's a problem.
Yeah.
But yet it is quite legal for a police officer to kick somebody's door in. But the circumstances are you have to be in immediate pursuit of the suspect. And if they get in the house and slam the door in your face, then under certain circumstances, yeah, it's like that. That might be quavered, but it is quite acceptable. In fact, even in PACE, the Physical Evidence Act, which came out in 1984, it does make allowances. That's enshrined in law now, that if you're in immediate pursuit of a suspect, you can force an entry without going through. Because it takes a long time to get a warrant. Search warrant or warrant for entry. Call it what you want. But it is permissible.
I think that...
He turned on.
is it on?
Turn it on. Turn it on. Yes,
He should be sitting next to
Personal.
Mystery. I beg your pardon.
Sorry.
Those in the constabulary, as in North Yorkshire Police, who don't bend the rules, are those just fresh out of police college. So the young 21-year-old police constable, detective constable, the ones who are really bent are the ones at the top of the tree, aren't they? Chief constables included.
especially.
Is this being recorded? No, your detective chief superintendent, who's responsible for his whole team, is also very friendly with the chairman of the local golf club, president of the local Rotary Society. He knows a lot of people in society, and he wants to keep those people sweet and happy, doesn't he? So if anybody's going to be bent, I think you need to look at your superintendent or chief superintendent, and not forgetting chief constables. I think that North Yorkshire, someone may be able to correct me, have had about 5 chief constables in the last 7 years. I'm not saying they're bent. I don't want that on record, but I'm just making a
Just put
statement.
that out there, are you?
Allegedly.
Allegedly, thank you.
Yeah, I think my main officers, it's 2 women officers, and they bend the rules. But they bend the rules because they've got their duty isn't to pander to the sexist and racist officers at the top of of Police Scotland, basically. Their job is to find the people who are the serial killer who's killing all these people. So, yeah, if they need to bend the rules a little bit to do it, then they'll do it. But they're doing it for a good reason. And I think it's that sort of, it's very human, isn't it, to do things that are maybe slightly morally ambiguous in order to achieve the better good, if you like. So I think crime fiction books are generally a balance between good and evil eventually meeting its nemesis, if you like, and being completely sort of obliterated. And that's the aim. So my officers, yeah, they have to bend the rules a little bit. I mean, not too much. We're not talking about some of the stuff that the London Met's been up to. We're not talking about any of that nonsense. I'm talking about just sort of, maybe like one thing I've not used it yet, but I am going to use it because I think it's a really sneaky way in. You have to start setting your books in Scotland up. I have discovered during my research that it is illegal in Scotland for anybody to refuse entry to someone who knocks on their door and asks to use your toilet. So as far as I'm concerned, every police officer in Scotland can be bending the rules a little bit to get access to people's houses. Till they get to court, possibly. Yeah, but it's a story. I don't go to the court. I'm like Malcolm, I don't go to court.
Yeah, stop for sure.
I'll leave that for somebody else. It's somebody else's problem. So there you go.
Everyone had a go on this one?
Have we? Yeah.
Right, that will go through this very quickly. all I said in some of these things was the kicking in the door. I went from being a police officer to a magistrate, and very, very, very quickly. And my wife will confirm that I was normally one at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday who got the warrant from the police surprisingly. Even though they didn't pick on me because I lived nearest to the station, honest. Right, so we've got the next question. When planning your books, are you influenced by current forensic techniques and changes to law? And Ian's already mentioned one. For example, deset and prepace in 1984, when it was judges' rules, which were horrible, and restricted law, or DNA in the 90s and 2000s, and even now when we're getting more DNA. Do you set them before these things or use them to your advantage? And we'll start off with Kat first.
Cunningly, I set my books in 2002. So, whilst they adhere to pace, such things as mobile phone and digital evidence is not necessarily included. I think we're still on.
2017.
Yeah, we're still on BlackBerry Messenger. Which is only just coming in the latest book because it took us over into 2003, and we've only just discovered computers as well. And yeah, there's a reason for that. So that's why I set them.
What's the reason?
It just makes life easier.
Not very computer savvy then. A bit like me.
Well, my service goes back to the early 60s, so my pocketbooks are written in cuneiform. But science didn't start to make real advances until the development of the computer chip, when they had computers that could actually do the work and the analysis. Yes, they had fingerprints. Yes, they could do blood tests, but they would, if they unearthed a corpse, they would take soil samples, they would look for insect residue, debris, so they could work out which animal, which fly, etc., that feeds on human flesh or lays their eggs on human flesh was there. They know the life cycle, but the actual modern science didn't exist because we didn't have computers, and that was. So, I'll write it down for you. Without the computers to do the analysis, nobody they knew about DNA, but nobody knew its structure until Crick and Watson got busy. So there was no DNA testing, and everything was done. If you can imagine living as your parents did, and there were, you had a gas oven, or you had an electric oven, or you cooked or a fire oven. There were no automatically controlled appliances. So, as far as my books are concerned, the science wasn't there to be used, and
we're not daft, are we?
and that's why I write about things. I can remember what happened when I was 6. I can't remember what happened in yesterday. That's called getting old.
Yeah, my books are contemporary, but they often have a sort of backstory that takes you back a few decades. And the one I'm working on at the minute, which is the third in this series that will be out next year, it involves, I saw an article in a newspaper, and it was about facial reconstruction of basically cold case skeletons, skeletons that have been found. And I was just fascinated by that. Like there was a woman found in a bin in the Thames, a big, concreted into a bin, and they managed to reconstruct her face. And I find all that fascinating. So I've included it in the third book as one of the plot strands. And I think that's really fascinating. So I like sort of playing with that. And I do go down a rabbit hole when I'm researching it. And then, as I say, half of it doesn't even get into the book because it's just really the story of trying to identify this person. So the sort of science behind it, although I researched it, didn't fully understand it, but got a bit of an inkling of it. I didn't sort of use it. And also in that one, I had to consider DNA, and I had to sort of have the body being killed before there was any sort of form of DNA database in the UK or in Scotland, to make sure that that person couldn't be identified through their DNA, because they had to remain anonymous, if you like, or unidentified right up until near the end of the book. So that was quite interesting, having to do that. I enjoy researching that sort of thing. So, and my books are always contemporary, although perhaps perhaps it does take up a lot of my time trying to keep up with things. You know, like fingerprinting techniques have changed so much over the years, and processes and all sorts of things have changed, and how CCTV work and the access to it and everything like that has changed. But I find it very fascinating, and I think it can really add to the mystery of a book. Of you know, when you're plotting a book, it can really add to the mystery and the tension. And when you've got unidentified characters on your CCTV, you know, with hoodies down, and yeah, so I use it to my advantage. Oh, sorry. Oh, gosh.
That's why I've got a list.
I think, and I'm happy to be corrected, that a guy called Colin Pitchfork was the first man to be convicted of a crime, of a murder, in 1986. So if you take that as the yardstick, if you like, I think if you're writing a crime novel before 1986, certainly in the 70s, you can get away with quite a bit. If it's beyond that first prosecution based on DNA evidence in 1986, then clearly you have to be a little bit more careful and, of course, accurate. I think my third or fourth one, is set in the year 1849. So I didn't have any problems with that. And I chose that because my wife and I, Nora, were visiting Shildon Railway Museum in County Durham. I don't know if you know it or have been there, but walking around and looking at the old carriages, many from the 1840s, 1850s, I thought, why not challenge yourself and let's have a novel, again a crime thriller, set in the 1840s, and I chose 1849 as the year, which also meant that I could get away, not with murder, but get away with writing the crime novel using, again, imagination, but not being too overtly ridiculous about what the police could or couldn't do or were or weren't doing. Another one based on a true story was set in 1953. So again, I was able to, write that book knowing that people didn't have smartphones and computers and all the stuff that's around today.
Thank you. Both my series are contemporary, and therefore I do have to keep up with pace. Does everybody know what pace is? Yeah. Some people are shaking their heads. So you do? It's all the procedures that came out in 1984. It was changed in 2017. And then because of digital and video evidence, it has to change with the times as well. So keeping up to pace with that is important. I also think that when you're writing, you can or you should be creative. So, and because the pillars of police procedural writing include all the agencies, forensics, and all the other elements, you can be a little cavalier. And in some of mine now, if there is a crime scene which is a house, I've started to use with the forensics the estate agent camera 360 in each of the rooms as they go in. Because if a detective wanted back at the station to check whether something was in a certain position, from that point on, it would be there. I have patented that, by the way.
Oh,
Liz Mistry.
so mean.
But I just thought if it doesn't exist now, it's going to exist in the next few months. And it's the same when people sort of sign in to crime scenes. Why would you sign in now when digital fingerprint technology is there, which identifies you exactly as you are, who you are, the rank you are, and the person there would have it. The crime scene manager would have that digital information. So it's not only about using what's present today, but also trying to think ahead of what might be, because it takes nearly 12 months from the time of writing for a book to come onto the shelf. So it can be out of date as far as police procedurals is concerned by the time it comes out. Interestingly, seeing you all live in Harrogate, my latest book, 14, human remains are found as they're excavating the new Kexgill bypass. So I've managed to delay the opening of Kexgill a little longer for you. But again, we brought in forensic anthropologists, so it's been interesting researching that element of the book, and that keeps me writing. The research, the excitement of finding new elements and new possibilities is all part of it.
Right. Thank you all for that. That was very interesting. Just to give you one aside on the 1984 Police and Criminal Evidence Act. As police officers, we've got 1 day's training and 2 days if you did custody. And I got the 2 because I did custody. When you went to court for the first time, the solicitors and barristers and the defence must have done 10 weeks training because they knew every blooming thing of it and tore you apart and you didn't get it quite right. Having spent years doing a different system. Anyway, so the next question, I think everyone's answered it already, to be totally honest. What research do you do? If you don't, why not? And we'll start with Ian.
Most things I tend to rely on my memory, which is far better thinking about what happened in 1965 than it was yesterday. I still research, if I'm looking into particular offences, I'll still research the law as it applied then. And a lot of the law was, in fact, the oldest law that is still in existence that I'm aware of that is used on a regular basis is a 1361 Justice of the Peace Act, which allows a policeman to arrest or to keep, basically lock them up, keep them in the cells overnight, and either release them without charge.
Shame you got rid of it. Shame you got rid of it.
Or if it was, or put them before the court, where the court could bind them over. And this was handy for domestics. Somebody got a bit too much to drink, causing a fuss and a bit of a palaver, waving the fist about. Lock them up, let them sleep it off, settle down, and you can release them. Now, if they are still angry, you put them before the court, get them bound over. If they refuse to accept the binding over, then they can get fined and or go to prison. But that isn't, there's only one Act of Parliament older than that I've known that is still classed as law, and that's the 1351, I think it's Edward III, and that's the Treason Act. And don't ask me what that's about because I haven't researched that one. But most of the law that applied was Victorian. The Offences Against the Persons Act of 1861, the Licensing Act of 1872. In fact, that's come to the news recently because there's an offence in there of wanton and furious driving, and that's referring to horse-drawn carriages. But if you get somebody who's going mad on a push bike, there's no appropriate offence in modern law. So they were charged with an offence under the Licensing Act of 1872. But the fine has gone up from 20 shillings to 2 years. And quite rightly so, because this came to light when somebody was going ape on a push bike down the footpath and killed a pedestrian. Without that, there would have been no recourse to law. It hadn't been considered. Now they're planning to bring it into the modern, in the modern era. But most of my research has been in the legal aspect. I also have a book called Kenny's Outlines of Criminal Law. I'm quite sad at some things, which deals with the common law. And the common law is the basis of all law that we have now. And that comes from canon law, which is church law. But yes, I do the research, but I stick to the bits I can remember from when I was walking the beat, wearing a blue uniform with shiny silver buttons.
Where are we next? Liz next.
Oh,
Sorry, Liz.
I was just sitting to
We were
listen.
resting down this end.
Yeah, research. I do loads of research about all sorts of things, and very, as I've said before, very little of it actually gets into the book. But what it does do is it makes me sure that what I'm writing is at least on the right tracks. And often when you're doing research about anything, quite often it's about ways of killing people or length of time it takes for bodies to decompose in this circumstance or that circumstance. So often I go down a rabbit hole and I spend ages and I get loads and loads of notes and I print them all out and I look at them and I highlight them and everything, and then like 2 sentences make it into the book. But that's how it should be. I think your research is there to spark off ideas, and it can take you at a tangent and it can lend better ideas to your writing, and I think that's what it's all about. So you put in what you think you need to, and you leave out what you think is going to bore the reader senseless. Well, that's the theory.
I think research is important. I'm quite fortunate in that I've got 2 guys that I used to play cricket with years ago. One's a retired sergeant, one a retired inspector. So I use them as sounding boards occasionally. And also a couple of guys I was at school with years ago who were they're both retired solicitors. So again, useful to know people like that. And another avenue of research which I discovered recently in my current book, it's about drug smuggling from Ireland, from the port of Dunleary across to the England mainland. And I thought, I really don't know too much about all this. And I've got a racehorsing group in Dublin involved, stashing some of the drugs away in the horse boxes. Can't give too much away, but this is my current one. And I thought, how can I find out a little bit more about anything like this? Went online, found the Irish Times, found the name of the crime correspondent of the Irish Times, and sent him a very soft, gentle email telling him, being honest, telling him who I was and what I was doing, and was there any way in which he could help. And I got a reply, and he came back with 1 or 2 items. Clearly he had to be careful as crime correspondent of the Irish Times, but he referred me to a couple of previous cases that had occurred only a few years ago. I think one was where 3 JCB excavators were being shipped over from Dublin, and all the metal tubular structure of the JCB excavators were absolutely stuffed with cannabis or cocaine or something. Wonderful. So I also find it very educational. If I go down a cul-de-sac and I think I really need to know a bit more, go onto Google, research it, and then sometimes I end up boring my wife Nora with, do you know what I've discovered this afternoon? Thank you.
Thank you. We're having trouble with Mistry there.
I say I always get the blame. I'm the orphan in this family.
I think every author, every crime author has a little black book. And in that little black book are a number of names.
That's just you, Malcolm. Sorry.
You've seen it. Pathologist, soccer, as many as you could have. And they're always there with their number in case you need them. And the secret is not to use them too many times. I also believe that research is about place, because for me, in my books, place is another character. So Harrogate is critical. So using real street names, real places. Did you know that Angela Gallup, the chief forensic person who worked a lot with the Ripper, started her career at the end of Ockley Road, and that was the first ever forensic building in North Yorkshire. And that was found purely by chance, and it was really good to be able to pop it into the book as an afterthought, really. So I tend to use real places, the same in Liverpool, but it can catch you out. I wrote in one of them that one of the characters said about the lights on Media City, the BBC building, Media City in Salford, were pretentious. And about a month after it was published, I got an email through from a gentleman that said, I was really enjoying Only the Dead until I read the lights at Media City are pretentious. I designed them. So of all the people in all the world who had to read the book, it was him. So it made me very careful about, when you're doing research and when you're actually writing factual things about real places, to be very careful when you do the criticism of it. But yeah, it's important, like Liz says, you tend to spend a lot of time researching and only a small percentage of that goes in the book. But I still think it's critical.
Kat?
Yeah.
I do a lot of research, but similar to what everybody else has said, the majority of the research doesn't actually go into the book. It's there to give me confidence when I'm writing, so I'm not a police detective, I have no history in forensics. So when I'm writing about a pathologist or a scene of crime officer, I need to have that conviction in my words that I know what I'm talking about. So I do, like I said, I do a lot of research. I think, similar to what Malcolm said about place as well, 3 out of 4 of my books are set in Leeds because that's where I was born, it's where I grew up. So there's familiar places in there like the University, Merrion Centre, Hyde Park. And the first book, The Lies You Told, was set in Scotland, in the far northwest place where myself and my husband go, in a place called Gairloch. So we had to return there several times because I needed to do the research.
Submarines.
Stunning, and there's no technology particularly. You can't get a signal or anything.
Reason for that.
It was imperative. That's what I'm aiming for. I don't have a publisher, but I'm going to see if I can get one to play. So research does go in, and I think I'm really conscious of not putting too much research into books because I once read a book by an author who I truly love. But he spent 3 chapters talking about mushrooms, and not in a good way. And I just thought, I flicked through it and it really put me off, and I thought, if I feel like that as a reader, I don't want my readers to feel like that. So yeah, I spend a lot of time researching, going down rabbit holes, watching crime and investigation on that, and true crime podcasts, that kind of thing. But the majority of it doesn't go in the book.
Anyone know how to go yet? No?
No, we're all done.
Right. Well, I've got 2 more questions to ask, but we're running out of time, so I think it's far better to ask you. Have you got any questions? Has anyone got any questions for any of the authors to answer?
Michelle.
Yes.
Yeah. Just a quick one. Thank you, Malcolm, for acknowledging me in the back of your book. That was a lovely surprise.
Absolute pleasure.
But my question is to do with that. Obviously, you've acknowledged because of me promoting things on radio and also within my own social media and that, and obviously having, you as guests on the show and obviously other authors as well. Do you think that does help a lot to promote your books? I know
The radio shows.
Radio shows.
And anything that brings you in front of the public, whether that be through radio, TV, events such as this, have only got to be good for every author. And it's lovely, not only for that, but it's also lovely to meet your fellow authors. Although we do communicate on social media, it is lovely to meet again in the flesh. And so, yes, anybody who wants to promote authors, it's just wonderful. And again, I must thank Edwin at the back very much for these days that are going on in the Harrogate area. So yes, Answer. Sorry.
Okay.
And all the team and everybody who knows them. But it is important, and we don't take it for granted. And I also say that the library, because I've run a few events here myself, and what a wonderful venue it is. You couldn't wish to be in a better environment, and it suits this type of event, an author event, very much indeed. Thank you for the question.
Can I just chip in on that? Is that all right? Yes. Thank you, Michelle. Promotion is important. One thing that is crucially as important is reviews. So if you, and this is not just for me, this is for every author the world over, particularly us though. If you've read a book and you enjoy it, please leave a review. It doesn't matter if it's on, preferably it's on Amazon or wherever you buy your books from, but on Goodreads, on a Facebook page, even email the author direct just to say, thank you, I really enjoyed this book, or you didn't, don't want any of them. But yeah, please, reviews are the lifeblood. I think everybody would agree, because it's how new readers discover books that have been written. That's from the unselfish point of view. It also helps us with the chart rankings.
And just put a point.
Yeah.
If I could just put a point on that, some people on Amazon particularly, it's a 5-star rating, 5 being outstanding, 1 being not very good. But some people think it's the other way around.
Yes.
They think 1 star is great.
They do.
And I once got about a few 1-star reviews. And if it's a rating, you don't really know what they truly thought. But I had 1-star review, best book I've read all year. And it really made my head scratch. But it does affect your standing within Amazon.
Yeah.
So getting the rating right, or sometimes if you can, supporting it with a review, is always far better.
Any more questions?
That's
Any more questions? Yes.
It was just a quick question about setting a book in Scotland. Was it harder to swap from England to Scotland because the laws of evidence are so different in Scotland, is my understanding?
Yeah, I mean, that was something I spent... to be honest, it took me a long time to decide to move from my Bradford-based books up to Scotland, and one of the reasons it took so long was that particular thing. But I just spent a lot of time talking to some police officers in Scotland and also just researching it. You can find out so much online. One of the biggest things was the Police Scotland have got different districts from what they used to have, so I had to get used to that, West Lothian, district, and where it incorporates, where the boundary is, and a couple of times I was going to have something happen in a place that I thought was West Lothian, but actually when I looked at the police map, it wasn't. So I had to sort of incorporate that in, and so it was a big decision to make. But having said that, going home and writing the book in Scotland has been the best thing I have done as a writer. Oh. It was like I was going home, I was speaking the way that I would speak at home. Oh. The dialect, the Scottish humour, everything, it was just so easy for me to write once I'd settled on my characters. But more than that, it was like my mum and dad died before I was published. They didn't see me get published. They didn't see me get my PhD. So it was like this was a chance in a way to sort of pay my respects to them. Oh. So I've included their names in the book, my mum's maiden name, my granny's names, and various people that influenced my childhood. And a lot of me and my family and my childhood experiences have gone into that, but been updated because obviously it's contemporary and I'm really old. So, so it was the best thing I've done, and I'm just so glad I did it. I'm so glad I bit the bullet and did it, because I was scared. I would let people down. In my home village, I was absolutely petrified that I would offend them in some way, or that it just wouldn't, because I'm taking serial killers, for goodness sake, to a little sort of a rural area in Scotland, I mean, we've not had them before, but it just felt a bit. So I'm glad I did it. Yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, I've not finished with my Yorkshire series either. I'll still be writing the Nicky Perec and the Gus ones when I get the chance, but writing the Solanke and McQueen series was just, it was really good.
Time for one last quick question. Yes.
Do you do any kind of plausibility check on your plot? I'm just thinking that once you finish watching or reading a drama, as you think about it, you can start to see holes. You can take the action, well, it's not supposed to stand up to that kind of scrutiny. You get to the end and in your mind it's gone. Do you want your plot to stand up to analysis after reading or not?
I think the first thing that most authors do is to actually reread you leave it for a few weeks, allow the dust to, the mud to settle, and then you read it from start to finish. It's difficult to read it as if you've never seen it before, but you do find, or I found in mine, there are holes in the plot, because the first draft, it's called word vomit. You just start off literally with a pile of paper and a pencil, and you pour out from your brain everything there. Character arcs don't matter, plot doesn't matter, grammar doesn't matter. What you want to do is to get the ideas on paper. It's your editing that puts it into context and allows you to pick holes. Then you have to have it independently edited, or at least one or two other people to have read what you've written, because they will see things that you missed. Just as an example, nothing to do with writing these, but there used to be a club in Wakefield called the Contiki Club, and the owner was a glider pilot. And the one thing that glider pilots never do, because when they take a glider from airport or from airfield to airfield, it doesn't have its wings on, they're attached in the glider trailer. They put the wings on, and then they get somebody to check to make sure everything is secured where it should be. He didn't, and he lost a wing at 1,000 feet. That's checking the plot. And I found things that I've got badly wrong in mine, because you read what you've written and you interpret it the way you think you've written it, and you haven't. But yes, you do. You do make errors, and other people will find things that you've missed, or there's a breakdown in the context. But you've got to do that.
There's also, what our idea of plausibility is often sort of different from a reader's idea of plausibility. So I've had a couple of reviews, and one of the reviews, the reader had reviewed that they didn't believe that my character in the prologue was set in Inverness, and that they would move to Edinburgh. And this was a major thing for me, for that reader. And they gave me less stars. I've deducted a star because that's implausible. And I'm like, what? So, it's a bit arbitrary. And another one, it was, one I get a lot, because I always include mental health themes. And they say, well, if the detective is so damaged with their mental health, how can they possibly still be in the job? Well, let me tell you, I was teaching for over 20 years, and for the last 10 years I was crying practically every day driving into school, because I was so depressed and so anxious and so upset. And I went in there and I taught those kids, and I did a damn good job, and I held it together. And that's what people do, and I think they do that in any walk of life, in any job. You hold things together, possibly too long, and I don't see why police officers should be considered any differently, particularly, with the sort of things that we put them through in our books, and that a lot of them have to go through in real life. Obviously their mental health will be affected. Fortunately, there's a lot more mental health support within the police currently, recently. So that makes it better. So that's the two sort of plausibility things that people sort of pull. Not always me up with the mental health thing, but I have been pulled up on that, and I sort of think, well, I'm just getting my rant in now.
Really sorry, I have to call an end to this. Sorry. Really sorry, I'm going to have to call an end to this. I've been getting signals for about the last 5 minutes. We're running over, and there's another one coming around afterwards. Oh no, it doesn't just wave.
No.
So what I'd like to do now is thank the authors, because they've been really, really good. I didn't get through to my questions, which, I'd love to hear the answers to, but they've been so thorough and so helpful. I'm sure afterwards we're quite willing to have a chat with you and talk about different things about their books, and you may even want to buy some of them, having heard them speak. But I'd like you to now to give your thanks to the authors for the time that they've given up to do this. I'd also like to thank Edwin and the ladies who do the book Beverage for asking me to do this one, because I've really enjoyed it. And hopefully I'll see you all again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.